I am resuming the recording. All right, we should be good.
So if everyone is ready, we will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So welcome to the meeting. I'm glad everybody could make it. I hope everybody is still well and that nobody runs into this second wave of this virus. We've had enough aggravation for 1 year or two. And the first item on the agenda, approval of the prior meeting minutes, actually 2 meeting minutes, the April 27th special meeting and the May 18th regular meeting. And each of us were in attendance, and if you need a moment or two to look at them to refresh your memory, or if there are any questions or comments, please indicate at this time what they might be. So if there are none, we'll proceed. I'll entertain a motion to accept both minutes for both meetings at this time in a second.
Move.
And we have a second. And we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? There being none, that's accepted. Thank you very much. We, as far as I know, have no public guests, so there'll be no public comment at this meeting. And if we can move to the director's report and personnel.
Yes, let me pull up the correct document for the director's report. Just give me 1 second. I apologize. I have to go a different way here.
There were plenty of handouts for this meeting, that's for sure.
Yes. Okay, sorry. There we go, that should be it. Yes, that's it. Okay, so it's been a very busy month. We have been busy transitioning from almost completely work from home to staff in the building with curbside pickup going on with the public. That transition happened very quickly. And I have to give a lot of credit to our staff and our department heads, in particular, Molly and Marie, who really worked hard to get everything ready for staff coming back into the building and all of the intricate planning that goes on with curbside. You would think it's a simple thing, just bringing books out to cars. But it's not. It's quite complicated. But everybody did a great job, and the other department heads have been really good about lending their staff to help with the effort. So it's really a team effort, and it's been great. In preparation for bringing staff back into the building, I had put together a building safety plan and a staff safety plan, which I've shared with you in the packet. And everybody has been pretty good about following the protocol that we've laid out for them coming into the building and keeping everybody safe. It's been interesting being back in the building. I would say that the anxiety level is a little high. I will say that today I had report of a positive COVID case in the library of a staff person. So I had to do all the contact tracing and work that went around that surrounded that. So that was really the first time that we've had to do that, besides, you know, the one that I had right when we closed down the building. Yeah, it's not fun. Basically, I'll just go over, this is not in my report because it just happened today. Basically, the New York State Department of Health says that I am to contact everybody who has come within 6 feet of that individual for a duration of 10 minutes or more since 48 hours before the positive test was taken. So I questioned the person. We came up with a list of, I think, 5 people who fell into that category. I spoke to all of those 5 people today. They are quarantining for the next 14 days. Some of them, most of them can work from home, which is great, and they can do that. And one of them cannot, and so he is going to be paid per the federal family COVID leave, the COVID leave paid COVID leave program through the federal government.
Wait,
This is going to
Karen,
happen over and over and
Right.
over again.
I know it is. And
those
Molly,
are
go
those
ahead.
our funds? Are those federal funds when you say it's a federal program?
I'm not sure. The way I have to find out from Craig, because as it reads to me, it's the employer's responsibility, but I need to dig further into that because maybe there are funds out there that we need to apply for. But we have it set up in ADP where we can document all of that and pull together reports should that time come. Molly arranged for a deep cleaning of the areas where this person was working, and this person luckily was in a pretty, I don't want to say confined area, but the position was mainly at the workstation and some ancillary areas. So Molly made arrangements for that really quickly with the disinfecting equipment that is made available to us through OVAC. So that was today. Does anybody have any questions about any of that having to do with?
I was curious how it came up because I think it would help all of us. Were there complaints of the not feeling well or someone observed there? But
No, this individual is tested. She has another job at another place and she's tested routinely for that job. And so one of those tests that was just a routine test is the one that came up positive. And unfortunately, it took 9 days for her to get the results from that test. So that's not terribly helpful.
Is there any reference to anything like responding to a case like this in the pandemic plan?
I don't think that we addressed it in the pandemic plan. I'd have to go back and see, but I don't think that we were specific about what needed to be done.
And I was just thinking we didn't want to really be specific because our future may have more pandemics,
Right.
supposedly, but
Right.
there may be a notation of some kind that there, with the possibility of future infections,
Right.
the library has to respond.
Right. I hesitate to put specifics into the policy because the guidelines keep changing. So the current guidelines were the ones that Craig Olivo sent to me today from the New York State Department of Health, and I followed those exactly as it said. I expect, and perhaps we could put some sort of reference in the pandemic policy to those guidelines, or maybe we could put reference to the current guidelines in the policy and then attach the current guidelines, but that would need to be changed as they're updated because those guidelines have been updated frequently.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have anything specific either. I think, though, that it looks like it's going to be consuming a lot of your time, potentially, as the future rolls out. And this is a good thing to understand why your time would be spent this way,
Right.
or other librarians in the library,
Right.
and why people suddenly are quarantined, or
Right.
your staff has been impacted by this.
Right.
Or the building, it's just as a thought, you may want to make reference to.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good idea. I have to get back to the pandemic policy to put the closing down procedures in there. So that would be a good opportunity to include something about positive tests and the response to that.
Could I just ask a quick question about
Sure.
WLS and Terry Kirshner? Because it says right here that when you had your Regents Commission on Libraries meeting, he was a participant.
Yes.
And that some of the other library systems had, produced a document for their member libraries.
Yes.
Was he asked to produce a document so that you could all follow it?
We did ask him for a plan that we could
Yeah.
all follow. We didn't really get a plan. What we got were some guidelines and links to best practices, which is helpful too. But we didn't get an overarching plan that we could follow or tie into like some of the other systems did.
Yeah. What I don't understand, I mean, librarians can adapt good plans, and if the RCLS has a great plan, why couldn't he just adopt that so that everyone's on the same page?
Right.
I've never understood that.
Well,
Why
we
he
had,
couldn't do that.
yeah, I had shared that plan with all of my director colleagues and Terry.
Okay.
He saw the plan when he was on the Regents Council meeting because RCLS shared it at that time as well. But it just didn't really go anywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm so disappointed in their lack of
Leadership.
initiative on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that.
Okay.
Oops, sorry about that. I'm just gonna plow ahead here. There is, and I don't know if now is the time to discuss it or if we want to discuss it when we're discussing the pandemic policy. I'll bring it up now and then you can sort of guide me. We have been working through how to bring the public back into the building and in what capacity. One of our big concerns is, of course, children in the building. Currently, our unattended child policy says that children under 10 have to be accompanied by a responsible person, either a grown-up or an older sibling who is actually taking responsibility for them. In the re-entry committee meeting on Friday, we were discussing the possibility of limiting children in the building. And I know we've discussed this before, but I think it's getting to the time where we need to sort of make a decision because we're getting close, as we move ahead, we're moving closer to letting public in the building. The recommendation from the re-entry committee seemed to be that the age of 16 was a pivotal age. And perhaps during pandemic, we limit we change the age at which children can be unattended by a grown-up or a responsible older sibling to 16. So 16 and over would be able to be in the building by themselves.
That seems a little old.
Under 16 would not.
Okay, that seems a little old. That's an 11th grader.
I would recommend that we take these details to the
Policy committee.
Yeah, and we'll finish up the report.
Okay.
Yeah, because middle school kids go all over town unattended. 10, I understand, that's 4th grade. But we can't tell 9th graders that they can't walk in the building without their parents.
Well, even 7th graders, don't you think?
Yes,
no, I don't think we should have this because we had a problem with the library being a daycare center before, and I think that we need to stop it. So yes, we need to, as older as possible, because I have been there and seen parents drop their kids off and pick them up. And some of those 9th graders are out in the parking lot doing flips and dancing. So I think that we do need to put a cap on the age, and it may just have to be a little bit higher than we would want.
Yeah, I totally agree.
About security and safety for everyone, and it's making our library staff be security guards, and that's not fair to them.
Right, but 16 may be too old.
Yeah, I agree.
I disagree because we, at this particular time, we have no data or no experience that tells us this is how, children, even at 16, behave in terms of, will they wear masks? Will they do this? We have nothing. And so why is the library becoming the testing ground for seeing whether or not they're going to act in a responsible way in a confined space?
So perhaps we could call a policy committee meeting sooner rather than later where we can discuss this issue. But I do think that the board needs to be on the same page with it, frankly.
So Shandi, are you, I want to understand, are you saying that you think we need to change the age or no? you don't even.
I'm saying there's nothing, no data, no experience, no one that we can say, so how do, this is how children behave since this has started coming back into a building of any kind. So even a 16-year-old, as Althema was saying earlier, we know from past experience how kids act in the library when they're unattended. And it was something that really was not a good thing.
Totally agree on that.
So it doesn't matter whether they're in 11th grade, whether they're in 12th, it doesn't matter. We don't know how they're going to act with these type of restrictions, with mask wearing, social distancing. We don't know that.
Right.
So is this the right time for them to come in at this point unattended? Any child unattended.
And to follow your thought, Shonda, you said we don't have any information. There are other libraries that have opened ahead of us in other states. So we probably would be able to gather some information about how it's working out. And
you could, but then again, Ossining is very different from many other communities. And the way that the parents and families use the library is also very different. So certainly I would be happy to look at what's going on at other libraries. That I think is a great idea. But again, we have to remember what was going on prior to the closing of the library.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that White Plains, who hasn't started letting people in the building yet, but who has made the decision, is using the age of 16. Just as a point of reference.
Okay.
Well, that's good to know where it came from. And how did they get there?
I think through the same, it was funny when we had our re-entry committee meeting the other day, the group came to the age of 16, I think before I said anything about White Plains. And I think that the feeling is that when kids are 16, and I was a little bit leaning more towards younger, like 15 or 14, like high school, but I could see 16. There's a level of maturity there that's not there, most definitely in the middle school years. At 16, somebody could get a driver's or permit or whatever it is. But this is something that we can deal with in the policy committee, as long as we can perhaps bring it back to the Board of Trustees at a special meeting prior to the next board meeting, because I just worry that we're going to be letting the public into the bill. Well, I don't know how soon, frankly, but we should be communicating to the public about what we're doing about children over the summer.
So what's your best guess? You think that people will be in the building by August, or?
I'm thinking sometime in July. Maybe in a limited capacity, of course, not just hanging out there all day at the computers or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And possibly along the lines of what Shandi said, I personally wouldn't want anyone to ask me what the right age is to let kids in unattended, because I wouldn't have a clue. Right. I don't know how you could expect the board to give you have that expertise either. You folks are the people that observe the kids best.
Right, but I think this is whatever we decide, even if we decide not to change anything and let them in, 10 and over, we're going to get a lot of pushback and complaints. And so the Board of Trustees needs to be prepared for that and on board with whatever it is that we decide to do.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the other, I'm sorry, just
go ahead.
thought, the other part of this question, which I guess we can deal with in the policy committee, is how long this would be going on.
Right.
Very temporary in the time scheme.
The way I was thinking about recommending that we do it is like a month-to-month basis. So maybe if we decide to make the decision prior to July, that decision goes through the end of July, and prior to the end of July, we reconvene to revisit the decision and so forth. That's sort of how I had it in my mind.
Thank you.
Okay, so the policy committee will meet, and Amanda, I will reach out to you.
Okay.
Thank you. Back to the director's report, and I didn't mean to derail us, but that I wanted to make sure that we touched on that. Boilers being installed, or the gas, I'm sorry, is being installed. Hooray. Boiler
Yes.
project is almost done. That's really exciting. That big IMLS grant that Diana, Allison, Mallory, and myself wrote for got submitted. Hooray. And that was great. The buildings and grounds team have been doing an amazing job around the library. Maybe I can let Molly say a few words about that, if you don't mind, Molly.
I don't mind at all. And I do want to thank them today. They stepped right up as soon as I said we needed to do a deep clean, and went with me over to OVAC and picked up the equipment. Now all of the staff, all of the B&G staff know how to use the equipment and have met the guys at OVAC. So anytime they can go over and pick it up and clean either a small portion of the building that may need a special attention or the entire building if that's what's required.
So Molly, we borrow that equipment?
Yes,
And
yes.
do we, is there any cost, or is it appropriate for us to, a contribution? Is there any concern that we're just using it for free? And I guess it's okay, is what you're saying.
They're saying it's okay. I think if we want to make a contribution or discuss in the future at another meeting how the equipment was required or how it was acquired, how much it costs, how we're all sharing it through the town, village. I think the rec center can also borrow it at this point. We can talk about that. They've been very, very generous and helpful. Truly community minded. If one agency is clean and safe, then that's good for all of the agencies in the area. Our staff have, they especially responded quickly for the June 1st opening. We had to secure a lot of workstations that we weren't going to be using so we could make sure social distancing was respected. A lot of areas were rearranged or cleaned out so that staff weren't likely to sort of find themselves forced into tight corners or literally breathing on people's necks, that sort of thing. And I mean, a lot of it did require like considerable effort to move things quickly, and they did that. They've also done some tremendous work on lighting problems that we've had in many cases since the building is open, where fixtures were non-functioning and they were in strange locations. So we've had the lift out and we've been able to really dig around in spaces and get a lot of the lighting that we could reach back up and running again, which is great. They've also stripped the stonework that's in the lobby and down the stairs. I know we don't all look down at the ground, but over time it had gotten, because the stone is porous, it had gotten very stained and discolored. And so they've worked really hard. They're almost finished with that project. They're also doing some work on the outside of the building, just touching some things up. They also have been doing, really great work moving things from the book drop into the building and keeping them, isolated from everyone, keeping themselves protected from anything that might be contaminated in the book drop, and making sure that everything is in a space that, nobody's going to just be wandering by it and for some reason touching things. I will say I've followed what a lot of the other libraries are doing. Some of them are isolating books that are returned in, giant garbage bins with the lid closed for 7 days. I'm not sure that that's even particularly helpful. Our staff is keeping the materials on book trucks, and one of the reasons I'm happy about that is because books are very heavy, and if you've ever had to spend time, bending over and picking books up out of a bin, it really hurts your back. It doesn't matter how young and flexible and strong you are. And one of my concerns as I looked into that, sort of, you know, use a dumpster, roll the books into the dark, and come back 7 days later, is that the loading and unloading was probably going to cause some physical problems for staff. So I'm very glad that we have enough book trucks and we're handling the materials in a safe way. They're isolated from anyone, but at the same time, we're moving them like books on the proper equipment. And so I think we can avoid some back injuries there. I think that's pretty much it. I have to say they've been great as a team. Some of them didn't know each other that well. Some of them weren't always, they were tolerant of each other, but they've all become a great working team, and really have a lot of respect for each other and have been very generous with their time and energy and very flexible. I've asked many of them to change their schedules and then change them again. And they've, you know, unless another job prevented them from doing that, they've all been very gracious about it. That's it.
Thanks, Molly. We've been continuing with our digital programming. You have a lot of information about that in the director's report, and we've been doing as much communication to the public and with the public in some cases as we possibly can. Mallory has been keeping very, very, very busy. And did I miss anything? Oh, I just wanted to give a shout out to Ignaira Lopez, our head of Children's Services. She has been doing several training sessions for the teaching staff at the Ossining School District and is in popular demand right now with them. She's talking about all of the great digital resources that the library has for the students, which is exactly what we want that relationship to be. Does anybody have any questions about anything I've said or anything in the report that I perhaps missed?
Karen, I think it would be, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, I guess, Alice, you too. Sorry, do you want to go first, Alice?
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay. The children's section, and I also saw it on the newsletter online, they're going to be doing a summer thing with Jungle Gym.
Yes.
That's not from Jungle Book, correct?
No.
Okay, good. I just wanted to be sure it wasn't connected to Jungle Book.
No, no, no.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Alice?
Karen, I didn't have a chance to call you after the meeting at 1 o'clock, and there was a lot of discussion of book groups and book talks. So they were hoping that maybe the library could coordinate study groups, even having teenagers lead book studies. So we can talk about that.
Sure.
Okay. I just forgot to let you know.
That's okay.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Karen, the next item is the revenue report. It looks like the budget is being adhered to, and I didn't see anything outstanding on the notes. Everything seemed to be fine there.
Yeah. This year we're very lucky in that we're going to end up with a surplus at the end of the year because we had a lot of unspent personnel money at the beginning of the year as I was filling positions, but not filling them at the very beginning of the year. So that will be a good thing this year.
Good. Good. Then we can move on to committee reports. The first report, the president's report. Karen, I'm thinking that in light of what Molly was explaining with the volunteer ambulance and the equipment, that maybe we could at least post a thank you, I don't know, perhaps on the website or the emails that go out to patrons.
Yeah, yeah, I would want to work with OVAC on how to word that, because I know that they ran into a little trouble last time that was done with the previous company that they were using for the disinfecting equipment. So I would want to make sure it's okay with them.
Okay, it'd be nice to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the next item, also, Karen, we talked about a couple of grants. And I was wondering if we track the grants so we can see what it was for, if it was used on a timely basis, what the impact was, evaluate them.
I don't track them like that, no, but I can. You know, generally they're all in my head. And then I say to Bob, so Bob, remind me the grants that we got this year. And he can tell me the grants that we got this year.
Right.
But I don't have anything official or in writing.
Well, I'd like to have that just to, for record keeping, but also just as importantly, so when we evaluate the budget, we can see the above line and below line items. In other words, items that we can budget for because we know what the revenue will be, we know what the tax base will be, but also to understand the impact of items that come in through grants or grant money. And then we can evaluate things, I think, with a clearer picture of what the total activity is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I also asked Karen to send out an updated organizational chart. I hope everybody got to see that. It came through in an email. And if you've seen a previous one, a couple of us have over the years, it's a tremendously different staff makeup. And Karen, do you think that we're aligned for what we anticipate the immediate changes will be in the way we operate? In other words, I expect that the organizational chart is an ongoing project, but by the same token, you talked about anticipation in the way staff works and the way patrons come in. Do you think you need to do any more shifting in the way the
Yeah,
staff
I do. I absolutely do.
Okay.
I think that we're moving in the right direction in many ways. If we didn't have Allison Robbins or Mallory Marinero in the two positions that they are currently in, it would be very, very difficult to deal with this COVID thing, and lots of other things, frankly, such as the WLS technology issues and that kind of thing. I'm very glad with our two new department heads. Not only do they speak Spanish, but they're really good managers and they really round out the team nicely. But I think that there's a lot more work to do. I think, and I'll just speak in general terms, I don't want to get into specifics because frankly, I have to delve into the specifics for myself. But, you know, how we staff the building how we need to staff the building, I should say, has changed not only over the years, but there's been a dramatic change because of COVID. And frankly, I don't want to see us sort of slipping back into the old ways of doing things. I'd like to make sure that we are assessing every position that we have in the library and thinking about, is this the position that we need for the library right now or in the future? And I really do think, you know, I keep saying it's a blessing and a curse, this pandemic. I do think that part of the silver lining is that it allows us to do that more easily. Does that answer your question?
I thought that might be your answer.
Okay.
Yes, it does answer.
Okay.
And then in case anybody's wondering, we don't have the results of the budget vote yet. The governor's edict said that the votes can't be counted before 5 or 6 p.m. tomorrow. So the counting won't even start before that time. And last thing I wanted to mention was I attended the last Westchester Library Services Zoom meeting. No, it wasn't a Zoom meeting. They don't let guests talk. They don't identify guests. And you're completely marginalized. So you're able to listen in. And it was very enlightening. The Westchester Library Services is struggling with the one library that has not paid its fees yet, the money that they owe. And the concern is that the remaining libraries in the system are picking up that difference. Now, Karen, we're not paying anything in addition than what we've been assessed. So I'm not sure, I don't think they have a handle on this because there was a motion to fine the libraries that are not paying their fees in a timely fashion, a late fine. And someone actually had the audacity to say, well, should we call them and see why they're not paying? And the unanimous opinion was, what for? They owe the money. In addition, the Westchester Library Services had applied for and received PPP money. Now, if you recall, that's the money that the government has given to organizations and businesses that have payroll. and WLS received $565,000. Some of the newer members were more than surprised because they understood correctly that WLS is fully funded because they have monies coming from municipalities. And the explanation was, well, we took it because we could, but we don't know what we'll do with it. So it'll go with the other undesignated funds. That balance will be over $1 million at this point. They wouldn't reveal any other information at that meeting. I don't know when they do. I don't know who knows, but it's a very interesting story. Stay tuned, and when we find out more, we'll let you know. Are there any other questions or comments? That's all I have for the president's report. At this time, we can move on to the policy and bylaws and personnel committee reports. Amanda, if you are ready.
Well, basically the two policies that we've been talking about are up for resolutions for, I believe they're the security camera policy is, and then the pandemic policy. The security camera policy is a final reading and approval by the board, and the pandemic policy, that is just a first reading, correct?
Well, it's up for approval.
I know. That's where I'm a little bit confused. So
I'm a little bit confused too. I'm not quite sure how to handle it because it's a work in progress, and I usually don't ask the board to approve a work in progress, but it kind of has to be a work in progress. So I'm not sure what the best way to go forward is.
Am I wrong? Didn't we say we, was that the policy we accepted with amendments coming?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the last meeting.
So if were there no tangible changes then, or?
There have been no changes since then, no.
Well, then it would appear to be up for approval. And we can always revisit it if it requires changes.
Kathy's saying something. You're muted, Kathy.
Why don't we just do it as the first reading, because it's not finished, so it's difficult to decide.
Well, since we had a first reading, I would take that resolution off, and then
okay, all right,
until it's approved.
Okay,
We're ready for approval, I should say. So, is there anything from the Finance Committee? I don't believe that we've had a need for a meeting, or are there any updates? I don't think so. And
I'm sorry, Matt. I'd like to go back. We're going to meet again for the Policy and Bylaws Committee.
Right.
We'll be talking about the policy we just discussed about the children or the young adults coming back in and how we're going to work that. Are there any other policies, Karen, that as a committee we should look at this time?
Yes, the personnel handbook, I know that we want Craig Olivo to help us with a big overhaul, and I keep having to nudge him about that. But in the meantime, there are some things it's the employee handbook, we call it. There are some things in the employee handbook which are in direct conflict with the union contract. So if nothing else, we need to tighten those up. It's just like maybe 2 or 3 things, Kathy, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
So I think that would be something to do quickly, and then I'll keep nudging for the big overhaul.
Okay, so we'll discuss that then also. And is it appropriate at this point to begin to look at utilization of library spaces by community groups? We tabled that indefinitely, but we still had a lot of work to do on that one. And if in September we're back to considering things, we might want to pull it out and start to look at that one too.
I think it's fair to go back to that one. That one needed a lot of work.
I would urge you to consider tackling that now, because there are no conflicts with any groups using the building.
That's true.
Yes. Okay. So that's 3 then we'll begin to look at. Okay. Thank you.
So I'm going to change the sequence on the agenda for a moment and ask you to consider Resolution 52 and 53. We'll do them separately. The resolution 52 is approval of the security camera policy. Resolved that the Board of Trustees approves the security camera policy. Are there any questions or comments? If none, I'll entertain.
I thought we were doing it as a first reading.
No.
The camera. Security camera policy. Second reading.
Oh, Alice, I did reference 53. Alice is right. We were going to take that off.
Yes.
So, but the vote at the moment is in reference to resolution 52, security camera policy. If there are no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion and a second.
So move.
Do we have a second for resolution 52?
Alice.
And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? There being none, it passes. So we basically tabled 53 for the purpose of waiting for it to be completed.
Yeah.
And we're up to buildings and grounds, and there's new business for buildings and grounds that just came up late today. And Karen, if I can impose upon you to give us an overview.
I can do my best. And I understand if you don't want to make a decision on this tonight because I'm dropping it on you at the last minute. And unfortunately, John Tortosa wasn't able to join us tonight to go into detail. So now this is separate from the problem that we're having with the wells that I had emailed you about. This is a completely different thing. The mechanical system of AC4, which is the, you know, this, our building is broken up into various zones, and AC4 is the air compressor that deals with the most of the building, I would say. It's having a lot of problems in that the wells bring up a lot of sand and dirt. That sand and dirt gets stuck in the coils, damages the coils, and now it's a big Megillah to deal with that problem. We had to do this 2 years ago, I think John said, on AC number 5. But AC4 is a bigger unit. I sent you the proposal from Clean Air. Unfortunately, the total price for doing all of the work that is outlined in that proposal is $26,775, which is a lot of money. So I suppose now, of course, it's always thus. The AC4 is now down. It can't operate as it is right now. And so as we go into the summer months, the several areas of the building are quite warmer than normal because of this problem. So we won't be able to bring it back up until we do this repair. So I wanted to know from the board what you would like me to do. Do we want to approve this tonight? Would you like me to have John Tortoso come to a special meeting to go into more detail with you so that you understand it better? Because I certainly can try to answer your questions, but I don't necessarily think that they will be satisfactory.
So the parts that need to be replaced are apparently normal wear and tear. Was that phrase been
It's
used?
normal wear and tear for our system, yes.
And the reality is that Clean Air is the preferred vendor for this system, and the amount requires the board to approve it, if I have that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
If it's above 5,000, the board has to approve it. Is that right, Karen?
Yeah.
You had raised the limit for me for
10.
AC stuff, yeah, to 10, but this is well over 10.
All right.
Yeah.
And do they have an idea how long that repair could take? Do they have a separate crew?
They have, let's see, 2 men, 2 days is what John had suggested, or had said that they had said. When they could get it done is another matter. It would have to be scheduled.
Okay. And did John Tortosa have any opinion that he shared with you?
He felt it needed to be done. It's the same repair that was done on one of the other AC, I think AC5 about 2 years ago.
Okay. Okay.
Do
Unfortunately,
we have any sense of how long the other 2 are going to last? The other 3 out of 5?
I did not get any information from John about that. I don't know if the others have had the same repair.
Was the cost comparable to years ago when you had it done?
I believe the cost was a little less 2 years ago. I can't remember the amount of money right off the top of my head. But it was also a smaller system. AC4 is a big one.
Karen, I have a question.
Yes.
When the repair was done before, did they talk at all about whether or not there was some sort of protective factor that could be done so that this collection of dirt and sand or whatever doesn't go into the system, or this is just something that can't be, it's just something that happens and it can't be stopped?
We try to mitigate it as best we can with a filtration system, but there's so much that comes up. Our filtration system, just doesn't do the job all the way.
And the key was when it was installed, there was no way of knowing that this condition would be as bad as it is and would exacerbate over time. And that's one of the weaknesses of this style of technology. And that's what we're up against.
And John is frequently cleaning out the filters from the wells.
Karen, like everyone, I only saw this today and haven't had a chance to talk to John, but do you have a sense if this, if the work they're doing would also help with the drainage problem that currently exists on AC4 that causes us to have a ceiling leak?
No, I don't think so. That's a completely separate problem.
Okay.
And Karen, do you have an overall sentiment that we can't afford to let this go because the summer could just turn on us? And
I wish that it was something that we could put off or do more research on. Unfortunately, as the weather gets hotter,
right,
we have to be able to function in our building, especially as I'm bringing more people back in the building. So, I mean, as much as I don't want to do it, my inclination right now is that it's unavoidable unless I get new information from someone else.
Well, I would consider asking the board to approve this, but I would also ask that the Buildings and Grounds Committee pursue further explanation from John Tortosa and/or Clean Air, and just to get a better level of comfort with what's going on, because it's a little complicated. And I personally don't have that expertise.
Karen, another consideration is that since we are closed right now and they're going to have to be doing work in the parking lot, it would be more ideal to do it now than to wait. Also, but the heat issue is really important one, that as it gets hotter.
Yeah, I know. As far as the well goes, the well problem, we're waiting on Connecticut Wells. We have them scheduled to come. I think John told me the 26th. Unfortunately, we have to wait that long. So that particular repair, which is completely separate from this one,
right,
is going to impact the parking lot most definitely. This one won't. I mean, their trucks will be there, but they take up maybe 2 spots.
Okay.
Well, if there are no other comments or questions at this time, I would, we have to write up the wording of a new resolution. Oh, no.
No, we have 54.
We have 54. I'm looking at it and it's not registered.
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion, if there are no more discussion or questions, to accept Resolution 54, proposal for replacement of the condenser coils in AC number 4.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? There being none, this resolution is approved.
Thank
and
you.
we will pursue a little further education between Buildings and Grounds and John Tortosa.
Yes.
And the next item is old business. There are 3 items. The first one is the equity discussion. Karen, do we have a specific topic on that one?
Well, in the fall, I don't remember when, in the fall, we had started some reading having to do with the topic of equity and the libraries, sort of moving forward with an equity plan or equity committee or something like that. And so I had provided the board with several documents from GARE, government, why can I not remember? I have it right here. Just a sec.
Racial equity.
Government Alliance on Race and Equity. I had sent several documents from that organization to the board, and one document in particular seemed, from my recollection, to resonate with the group, and that was the one that I had Kathy include again in today's packet, because it has to do in particular with public libraries and the experiences of several public libraries in tackling this issue. So I wanted to know from the board, and frankly, this document, as well as the other pieces that come out of this group, resonate with me personally as a library director, I should say, because they deal with institutional racism and things that institutions can do to address the issue within their institutions. It's such a large topic. It's sometimes hard to wrap your head around what you can do, but as an institution, there are, in fact, things that we can do. So I wanted to see what the board would like to do.
Well, I feel we have a profound responsibility to take this work on. It's colleague board members have shared shared experiences that trouble me. And in light of our national crisis that we're facing now, I think that we must move forward with this work. We had talked about doing our long-range plan with the focus on equity. And I really encourage us to start this work. I don't know how you want to go about that. And I also had shared with the board the Peggy McIntosh article on white privilege as well, for board members to share. But something that I was on the board for many years with Shandi, and on page 29 of the report, it talks about equal access versus equity. And we always look at everything related to equal access, but I don't know if we look at it from the lens of equity and equitable outcomes. And that's what a lot of the achievement gap work has to focus on in the schools. And I think we need to focus on that and play our role as a convener. I'd like to see the library be a convener on this issue for the community.
I don't know that we've been successful in creating an infrastructure or a mechanism to accomplish what we haven't really set goals. We haven't really have ongoing discussions. There's no continuity. And I think it would be appropriate to have either a committee or an ad hoc committee or a group that looks at this on a regular basis, because when we talk about it in these meetings, it becomes a little dissipated because we have so many things that require our focus. And I'm going to sit down with Karen, or remotely sit down with Karen, and possibly draw up a brief outline of what I'm thinking. I'm going to impose upon you, Karen, to help me. And then we'll forward that to the board and ask for your input and see if if that's a reasonable approach to take. And if not, we'll find the right one. But if anybody has any comments regarding that, I think that's what I would like to work on.
And this is a moral imperative for us to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to spend more time on it.
The article that Karen sent us, I think, is really interesting, and it does give you a framework from
Yes.
which we can work. And if you're going to incorporate that framework into your outline that you're doing, Matt, I think that would be terrific. I found the first part of the framework to normalize, basically, as I read through it, it was a bit intimidating, the normalizing, because one of the first things you have to do is to basically really, if we're going to look at the library in particular, look at what has become sort of standard practices or policy that might be areas of concern and which we can address. So it's a lot of work to do. I think we need to do it. I'm not discounting that at all.
Right.
But I hope that you incorporate this into what you're going to design.
Thank you.
What I wanted to say was that I thought this Gale report was really good, and starting on page 14 with the Equity in Action Library initiatives, you can read through and learn so much about what other libraries have done. And then getting started with results-driven planning, I think, is really useful, and that's on page like 36 or whatever, 37. But basically creating a racial equity action plan, which is, I think, our key role as trustees, must be in conjunction with library staff and also hopefully our community. So I liked Alice's conversation, courageous conversations that she mentioned, which a lot of school boards have done. So you have these different levels, you know, interacting with each other, but I really don't want to top down. I don't want us doing everything for the library. I would really like for it to be a conversation with all the different components of our community. So certainly we could start with a racial equity plan, an action plan, and get feedback. But I really think our board should be talking together on this. So I think Matt has great ideas, Alice has great ideas, Shandi, all of us have great ideas, but I don't think it should be one person doing it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep, I think
sound with people.
I think the first step is to get a structure established, bring on as many board members who are willing to participate, and then potentially expanding it to staff or turning it over to staff, but giving guidelines. So I think that we have to do it in incremental steps.
I'd like to hear from Shandi and Althema and Cecilia.
I agree that this is overdue and we need to put this on the calendar for now. And I'm available certainly in this effort.
Thank you.
I think that I agree that I think that the framework that is in the document that Karen provided is something to start with. But I'm not sure why this isn't going to be part of a meeting and would be a committee of the board.
Yeah.
Versus part of a regular meeting where the board discusses the steps and, you know, gets together, has a conversation about their input to the question as part of each normalized, organized, and operationalized that leads towards
You dropped out the audio.
I don't know if she's still connected. I don't know if you can hear me, Shandi, but
yeah,
the idea is very simple, not to take anything away from the board meetings, but I don't feel that the board meetings have enabled us to gain any traction. So not that it's the only way, but I was reaching out thinking that if there are a small group of people focused on this idea, brought it to the board, and then at least we had either a strategy that could be discussed, or we could have steps that we could discuss, or something that'll make sure there are one or more people who thought about this, who had a discussion and a direction to bring to the board, not to segregate it from the board or keep it away from the board. Because I don't see any traction, and I feel that I'm a part of this, and I'm more than willing to get it going, and everybody else will be involved.
I think that we need to ourselves discuss this. I know with Amanda and Shandi, I was used to board developments with focused conversation on specific readings, sometimes facilitated with people who had expertise in the area that we were looking into. I think this is a very timely topic, and we need to dig in as a board. We need to dig in as an organization. The police chief, I know, did implicit bias training of his force. I don't know if we have done any of those trainings within our organization. Have we ever, Karen?
Through the WLA, we had some staff attend an implicit bias training last year, but we haven't had implicit bias training for the whole staff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, actually, this concern came up when we were doing our long-range strategic planning, and we did have some conversations at that point with a hope that we could have more of a focus on this issue of equity and you know, racial difficulties in our community, whatever. But we haven't done that. We haven't followed up on our long-range planning, and it seems to me that what you're saying about having someone lead us through this would be maybe good. Because we do need to develop an actual action plan, an equity action plan for our library, I believe. And there are so many good examples out there. And I think this report that Karen shared with us, this GARE report, is really good. So I don't know if we would want to, I mean, I don't know, is there a GARE library in our region? Do you know, Karen? I couldn't find a list of any of the GARE libraries.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I was going to reach out to the libraries who are identified in the report to see, you know, what process they used and path they followed to sort of get an idea of where to start.
Yeah, yeah. But I do think we need to move on this, and we did talk about it. Was it 2 years or 3 years now since we did the strategic plan? Time just goes by so quickly. Was it 3 years ago? Is it 2017?
We started the work in 2016, and we ended up with the plan in 2017.
Yeah, so we're overdue on that.
Yeah, so it expires the end of this year.
Yeah.
Shandi, my sense, if I heard you, was that you want it to be sort of a standing discussion, not just a separate committee. Is that correct?
What I was saying is that sometimes you have to have a second board meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like a board development meeting?
Hmm?
You mean like a board development meeting?
It could be considered board development, but a separate meeting from the business meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Yes. Where it's not limited to 25 minutes.
Special meeting.
Yeah.
Alfima, we haven't heard from you.
I think that it's something that we definitely need. I know we've been talking about this for quite some time, even development as a board.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do it. I think it's something that we have to do, but I want to do it not in a rush. So I figure if we could formulate a plan to do it, whether it's, you know, like it was said, separate committee, but I do think that it should be something that we definitely work on, because the library is the hub So definitely equity and diversity should be, you know, something that we work on. So however we can do it, not just the action item, not just the action item, you know, on the list, because I know no one wants to sit here and unpack a 50-page article, but, you know, just take our time and really work on it. And maybe now is a good time, you know, we're doing virtual, so we won't have to go in the building. So maybe we can figure out a schedule on how to work on it.
And Althema, in a conversation that you and I had last week, there are a lot of separate efforts going on in the community right now.
Yes.
Right? On this issue. And there's no sort of coordination of them.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they need to be coordinated, but I think it would be good for people. People are looking for ways to learn and grow on this issue. And
yes.
And as well as participate when organizations do things. And I think I shared it with Althema and Shandi when I spoke with them. The first library development meeting I ever went to, Maureen Sullivan, from the former president of the American Library Association, talked about how libraries should be conveners on issues. And I would imagine, you know, I don't know how to do this. I don't feel equipped to lead this discussion, but I want to make sure that it's a worthwhile, you know, like moves us forward and comes up with a plan. So I'm wondering if we might need a consultant or someone to help move us and make us accountable to keep going and come up with deliverables that are appropriate. And we're going to have to be reaching out in the community and doing surveys and all sorts of stuff, because in order to ensure equity, we need to hear from many, many people. And that's very much like a long-range plan process.
Mm-hmm.
I think in relation to that, Alice, while I agree, but I think until we're ready to commit to us as a board doing it, hiring someone, we shouldn't do. I think that the first step should be
I meant
read
to
the
train
articles.
To facilitate for us, Althema.
Yeah, but I mean, the first step is just us reading it.
Okay.
I don't feel
well,
like
I thought
we need to hire someone for us to read it. I mean, I don't know if everyone read it or not. I'm not assuming they did or didn't.
Yeah.
Right. I assume we did because we were asked to.
Right.
Okay.
But here's the thing, Alice.
Shandi, you're really breaking up. Your video is really breaking up. I'm having a hard time understanding you.
Part of learning, figuring it out, is just that. You have to figure it out.
You're right. You're right. You're
and
right.
So that's why I agree with Althema. There shouldn't be a facilitator.
Okay.
And you can't be a convener unless you have gone through something.
You're right.
So, like, stop trying to put it on someone else to bring you through it, and do whatever you have to do, just like you would do with any other topic that you're responsible for as a human being, and figure out how to do it.
Well, I think when we do facility stuff, we've had to bring in outside people to help us too, right? But I understand. So let's plan a meeting. Let's put it on the calendar. Karen, do you want to send out like a survey or something? What time can people, what days, times are people available to have a discussion? Mornings, afternoons, evenings, what works for people?
But wouldn't it be possible that Monday evenings are, I mean, we do meet usually on a Monday evening. I'm just
Monday
curious.
Evenings work for me.
They do for me too.
It works for me.
Yep.
Monday works for me as well.
Althema?
Yes, they work for me.
Matt?
Equity Task Force next Monday.
Well, it's not an equity task force. It's the board. Is it a board development? Can we, our board developments, do they have to be filmed, Karen?
I can double check with Howard. It's my understanding that if everybody's here, it has to be an open meeting, but I want to ask him specifically about board development work because I don't necessarily think that that's so for board development work.
Yeah.
I really like Althema's comment about it being a conversation among us about this particular resource that Karen shared, because I think that should be where it begins. I agree.
The resource that Karen shared has topic headings with numbers underneath them that it tells you how to do it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it has that plan. Yeah.
So if there are no other questions, we will work on setting up a separate gathering.
Well, does next week work?
I can't be there. I have an equity task force meeting.
The following Monday?
Yes, I'm available.
The 29th or the 22nd?
29, I'm available.
Can we put it on the calendar for the 29th then?
Okay by me. Do we have a special name for it?
Special meeting.
Board development session.
Development, I guess.
The board development session.
Yeah.
Karen, you're going to send us dinner?
Delivery.
Curbside pickup. We'll have curbside pickup.
That's right. You can pick up your dinner at the library.
Has it been quarantined?
72
Same time,
hours.
7 p.m. Monday?
7 p.m.
7?
Did you say 7?
7 p.m. on the 28th.
Okay.
No, the 29th, right?
The 29th.
29th. 29th,
Yes.
that's right.
Oh,
Oh,
June.
wait a second. I can't start on the 29th. I have a Latino U coach training that ends at 7:30 that night. I just looked at my calendar. So I can't start till 7:30. I mean,
We could do let's do it on the 22nd. Equity task force is in the morning. I misread my notes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's good for me too.
okay, so we're going back to the 22nd
22nd for me
Yes.
is good.
at 7.
That's next week.
Next week.
Yep.
Okay.
Karen, I'm sorry, Matt. If I remember my notes correctly, in reading your director's report, someone is going to be doing an online racism in the media or racism in movies, something like that. Did I read that?
Yes, Bonnie Katz, our adult
Oh, yeah.
services librarian. She has put together film programs for us in the past, and she's putting together a program on racism in film.
Okay. Will she be guiding a discussion on that?
Yes.
I'm curious because it also sort of falls into this whole discussion that we're having right now. Also.
Yes.
When is it, Karen?
Let me look for it, just a sec.
Mm-hmm.
And will there be limited attendance or?
I'm not sure what platform she's using. I'm assuming she's using Zoom, in which case I believe it would be 50. Oh goodness, I'm losing all my documents here. Can I send you that information? Because for some reason, I can't pull it up immediately.
No problem.
Thanks. Let me just make a note to myself.
I would love to know about that too.
Yep.
Yeah, let us all know.
Yep. I'll send it out to everybody.
Does anyone know what the Ossining school system is doing around this particular topic or issue? Have they set up any, plans plans, or are they doing anything differently? I just know over the years they've made attempts to deal with equity in education, and so I'm wondering if they're having these conversations now too.
Everyone in the
Anyone know?
community is having these conversations, and the school system convened an equity, I think they call it the equity task force. And they've been, I think this is like the third go round on the equity task force.
Yeah.
And after the situation that happened in the fall with the swastika and the N-word, they had several meetings with students and added students to the equity task force as well. And the town has convened an equity task force, Dana Levenberg. Shandi and Matt and I attended. If anyone else is interested, just let Karen or I know, and we'll get her to add you to the distribution. Althema, you've been added to the distribution for that meeting?
Yeah.
So the town is doing that. The village had a Zoom meeting last week. The schools had a Zoom meeting last week. And then there was another Zoom meeting on Friday night, but I'm not sure who convened it, but that I didn't attend because my son came home. And there have been several rallies and marches, obviously, too.
Right.
So there's a lot going on. And I'm sure there's a lot, way more. Althema, there's a lot more going on, right? You would mention that you had heard of other groups as well.
Yeah, I know there was something yesterday, and then there was something Saturday. So there just seems to be a lot of people getting together collectively to talk about it and to
right.
show their support of different things.
Right.
It would be nice if someone would write up what's taking place in the community, because I get a lot of my local information from the Patch or the Ossining Voice, but they don't tend to report on stuff until way after the fact.
Yeah.
It seems to me there's no calendar, or I don't know. Garrity had a little bit that she put out. Oh, and before I forget, I wanted to thank Karen for her letter to the community that she put on the website. I think that's really wonderful, Karen. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, I can only take a little bit of credit for it. I got a lot of help.
Oh, okay.
From
yeah,
some of the people here in this meeting.
I figured so. I figured, but thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Any other questions or comments on the equity discussion? If not, we will talk briefly about the long-range strategic plan. It may seem that it's been tabled or ignored, but the reality is that Karen has largely been unable, and I've made some inquiries, and I've been unable to find a really good fit for an advisor or a consultant on this. And then the conversation that we had led itself to possibly the library doing it itself. And we think we have the resources and the staffing. And I'd like to open up the discussion for any comments or thoughts from anybody tonight about the library doing the strategic plan.
I think we should. I had mentioned that previously, that we could do it, and it would be, you know, that way we could take our time and kind of do it from our standpoint as the residents here and the staff that actually work with our patrons. So I think that it would be good for us to do it ourselves.
I think that we have unique circumstances by needing to taper and tailor the staffing to the way we want to change the way the library is even run. And want to add things like racial equity. And I don't know that there's an outfit or an individual out there who's equipped to handle all of our special needs.
Can I add my 2 cents? I always do, whether you say yes or no. I was one who pressed very firmly for hiring a consultant because I know all of the work and heavy lift that goes around this. But I have to say, first of all, the quotes, you know, the off-the-cuff quotes that I was getting from the various consultants who I thought would be good for us were quite high. we budgeted $20,000, and for $20,000 doesn't get you too much when it comes to long-range planning. Subsequently, I had a very interesting conversation with Janine Esposito, who was the trainer for our Excite Transformation for Libraries program that several of us went through. She's really amazing, really good. I trust her very much. And we were having a conversation about other things, and she happened to say she feels that librarians and library staff should run their own long-range planning processes. What she does is provide training for the librarians to run what she calls, I think, community conversations or collaborative conversations or something like that, so that the librarians have the skills to do that work. We learned some of it as part of our Excite training, but what her input was that the library staff and volunteers, trustees, are the trusted faces in the community, and people will tell us the truth. People will not shy away from giving us criticism, which is always a reason why, well, which is one of the reasons why people like to hire consultants. But she also said, which I didn't really think about, was as you go through the work of doing the meetings and doing the surveys and all the things that you'd have to do, you're building stronger bonds with your constituents and your community members. So she changed my mind. And I know it's going to be a lot of work if we go in that direction. I would like to see if, and if the board would be amenable to this, if Janine would be able to train some of us and what that would cost. And, you know, it could be $20,000, in which case we say no. But I would like to sort of pursue that a little bit, because I do think that, you know, we would be given the tools that we need to do the work that we need to do. My 2 cents.
Can you tell me, what is Janine's name again?
Janine.
Esposito. Yeah.
That sounds like it makes sense, Karen.
Yes, it does make sense.
Okay.
Good plan.
Yep.
So I'll pursue that.
Would we get started on that in August, or?
Potentially. She and I sort of left it that we would reach out to each other in early July to sort of talk a little bit more about it and to see what it would look like and what it would cost. And so I would, you know, August seems like a good goal.
Okay. No other comments on the long-range strategic plan. The last item in old business is the WLSIT. I've made some comments with it. There was nothing else. Was that, Karen, on that?
Oh, only that as we go back into the building and have to deal with the WLSIT network and not our own personal networks, the pain becomes real again.
Right. And the library gets billed semi-annually for the cost?
Twice a year, yeah. Our next bill should be coming towards the end of June, I think.
Right.
Soon, very soon.
And is that, are you given a chance to comment or preview it, or they just give you the allocation and?
They give us the allocation. I believe it's going to be the same amount of money that was charged to us in February.
I thought there's less equipment that's using the
Yeah.
service.
We should get a discount, don't you think?
Yeah, an aggravation discount. The amount of equipment that we're being charged for this year was determined back in the fall when I filled out I dropped a few computers. So yes, we should be getting charged less than last year.
Because one of the comments Wilson, I believe, at WLS made was there should be some money returned to the libraries.
Yeah.
None of us have been open. So if it's based on usage.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. The WLS board, from what I understand, has approved that 50% of the equipment charges that we pay. So the total bill that we pay WLS is roughly $145,000, give or take. And about $50,000 of that is for the computer equipment. We're charged a per computer fee for the year. And from what I understand, they're going to be discounting that for the second half of 2020 by 50%. So that, well, if it was a full year, it would be $25,000 instead of $50,000, but it's actually half of that, $1,250.
Good.
Yeah.
All righty.
Thank you
Also,
for
just
remembering
to,
that.
when I went over, we had the finance meeting. Just to let you guys know, and I don't know if you said it, Karen, if you said it an hour before, but even if we break away, we still have to pay a big chunk of stuff. So even though, like, you know, other libraries took everything and still had an enormous bill with WLS, so even though we move some of our stuff, it's still a hefty bill that we have to pay regardless.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that the PLDA was working on before everything sort of fell apart, was looking at that model and proposing or considering to propose a different model that doesn't penalize libraries in that manner.
Yeah.
But that's a big change.
Yeah.
Who is WLS accountable to at the state?
Well, that's a good question. They fall under the governance of the Division of Library Development, which is under the State Ed Department. I can tell you that there is—
It's in the sub-basement of some building somewhere.
Yeah, DLD, the staff of DLD have been decimated over the years. So like personnel-wise, there aren't many people up there who can do anything about much. But I can also tell you from previous experience at Finkelstein Library, when we were having a lot of trouble with RCLS over there, there really isn't anybody at the state level who was willing to do anything. Essentially, WLS is accountable to its Board of Trustees, and that is pretty much the highest authority that anybody will own up to. And unless their Board of Trustees sees a problem and decides to do something about the problem, nobody from the state is going to come in and do anything about it.
It's accountable to itself because there's a complete lack of involvement on the state level.
So they don't have a charter of any kind?
They do.
Or
yeah, they do.
They have bylaws, but there's no oversight. There's
Yeah.
no one, they're not accountable to anyone. Which is why they're able to say to me as a president of a member library that you can't speak at our meeting. And I also don't get the handouts. And I don't know what to do about it. So that's WLS. And we're up to new business. Were there any other points on the reopening of the safety plan that needed review? No.
I don't have anything. I just
Okay.
was putting it out there for your information.
Okay. And now we're up to the highlight of the meeting, the discussion of the 2020-21 State of Officers and Committee Appointments. At this time, I'll open the floor if there are any nominations for any office. Well, let's start with the president. Are there any nominations for the office of president at this time?
I nominate you, Matt.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
I second that.
I accept. And we'll open the floor for nominations for the vice presidential position.
What about Alice?
Does anyone else want to do it?
I will second it.
Good idea.
I didn't hear. Does anyone else want to do it? I'm asking you.
Yeah,
Not me.
Does anyone else want to do it?
it was crickets.
Okay. All right.
And I will open the floor for nominations for the position of secretary at this time.
Who is it currently?
Cecilia.
I
Does anyone
nominate
else-
Cecilia.
Second.
So we have a slate. Matthew Weiss, president, Alice Joslo, Vice President, Cecilia Quintero, Secretary. The vote will occur at the July meeting. And if I'm not mistaken, it's July 6th, right, Karen?
I don't have my list in front of me. But
at a resort, right? At a resort?
Right to me. Yes, at a resort called your home. Staycation.
Staycation. That was a good comeback, Karen.
So maybe Kathy, no, it's definitely the 6th, right?
I'm quite certain it's the 6th, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's a 6th.
Okay.
What day of the week is that?
Monday.
Monday.
Like, duh, of course, right? We meet on Mondays. Duh. Okay.
Okay, so we don't have any public, so there'll be no public comment.
Can I ask one
Raising
question?
her hand.
Yeah, does anyone want a list of next year's meetings that I've already put together? Do you want time to think about it before July's meeting? I will send it out.
Let me ask you, are you able to send out, once they're done, can you send them out as like meeting invites so they go automatically on our calendar?
She'll have to look into it.
Yes.
You could ask Alice and Kathy.
But I'll just send you the list of the, the schedule for now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll keep my Mondays open, Kathy.
Okay.
And we are at the point where we can go into executive session if there's nothing else to bring to our attention.
So moved.
And I'll entertain a second.
Second.
And Kathy, thank you very much.
Okie dokie. All right, leave.
Cecilia will note the timing for the executive session period. And Karen, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion to end the meeting.
So moved.
Second. And all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thanks
Stay
again,
safe,
everyone.
everybody.
Stay well and stay
Thanks,
safe.
everyone.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.